everyone. Our topic of our webinar today is Building Equitable Learning Environments in CTE and STEM. I'm your host, Mike Lisecki, for the webinar, and now let me turn to Carolyn Vanagan Dunn. Go ahead, Carolyn.
Thank you, Mike. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, depending on where you're located. I am Caroline Vanagan Dunn, and I'm the director of the Science Foundation Arizona Center for STEM at Arizona State University. And I'm a co-PI with Elaine Kraft for the HSI ATE Hub project that's hosting this webinar. Funded by National Science Foundation, the HSI ATE Hub is a 3-year collaborative research project that joins 2 successful programs in Mentor Connect out of Florence Darlington Technical College, where Elaine Kraft is the PI, and Kickstarter out of the Science Foundation Arizona Center for STEM, where I was the PI. Our objective has been to build capacity and leadership at 2-year HSIs for developing competitive ATE proposals, recognizing the role that you play as drivers in your community's economic success. The approach has been to include interactions with the HSI community, like this one, through intentional expanded engagement like this broadcast, to enhance learning from training webinars to develop educators' acumen of culturally responsive instruction and high impact practices. And to support this approach, we have established a resource library where you will find this and other webinar recordings along with vetted publications. And the link to this library is right here on the cover slide. So on the next slide, I would like to go ahead and welcome you to the 2nd annual webinar that addresses culturally responsive and equitable instruction environments for CTE, or current technical education. Now remember, please type your questions into the chat box. I see we have some activity already, and I'm going to do my best to keep track of your questions and interject as appropriate to get your questions answered. Please complete the survey at the end of this webinar, and you will receive automatically a link to the recording of this webinar, as well as finding it on that resource library. I'd like to introduce Gregory Jackson. He's the Associate Director of Membership and Partnerships at NAEP, which is a National Alliance for Partnerships and Equity. He has orchestrated this presentation, which Mike titled it as Building Equitable Learning Environments in Career and Technical Education, or CTE, and in STEM. Now, Mr. Gregory Jackson provides leadership, outreach, and support to the NAEP membership, which is comprised of representatives from state education and workforce development agencies, secondary and post-secondary institutions, and organizational and business partners. Mr. Jackson is instrumental in building strategic partnerships that support NAEP's development efforts. And we're very pleased to have him present NAEP's work and to introduce his panel of educators. Now, this panel will share with you the helpful guidance, the strategies, and the interventions that they have gained from working with NAEP to foster equitable learning environments. So we're very glad to have all of you here. And Gregory, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Caroline. That was a great warm-up for me.
You bet.
So I want to say hello to everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. I'm doing pretty good. I'm here in New York City, and hopefully while I'm speaking, you won't hear the sounds of the city, but if you do, don't get nervous. It's just how it is in this particular environment. So I'm really excited to have an opportunity to introduce 3 folks that I've been working with over the past couple of years. I want to start off by a show of hands. And you don't really have to do a show of hands, but I want to start off with talking about how much we love taking a journey. It's springtime, and springtime's a great opportunity to start planning our journeys that we may be taking in the summer. And so today, I'm going to, and collectively, we're going to take you on a journey through where we took the work from this grant and moved it beyond the sum of its parts. So the 3 individuals that I'm going to introduce to you today to kick off this journey, I met a few years ago in New Mexico. And little did we know when we met at that time that our roads would continue down this far. And sometimes opportunities knock very softly And I'm a better and more complete person as a result of this chance encounter with Kathy, Herman, and John. And so what we're going to do is we're going to embark on this journey. Today, I'll introduce you to Kathy Albin from North Idaho College, and to John Juarez and Herman Moreno from Doña Ana Community College. Next slide, please. So here's the journey for today. I'm going to do my best to set the stage for our three presenters. And we'll start our journey in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I'm going to reference some of the work that began in Las Cruces, at least for us. And it's the NAEP culture wheel, which frames our starting point for this work around fostering equitable college learning environments. It's the lens that they applied at their respective institutions. And as we continue our journey, we'll go a bit deeper. We'll take the deeper dive, and each will share some examples of their work and the tools that they used, which you can appreciate, and we do to consider replicating some of the manners in which they've used some of these tools. After we've taken this deeper dive, we'll come up for a little air, and I'll do a quick recap of some of the very general outcomes from their collective work and the collective work through this particular grant. And then, like any resident journey, we'll try to demonstrate how, after a period of reflection, we chose to carry on some of this experience with us. We'll share with you how we chose to carry the work forward. And this is through the NAEP Affinity Group rollout. And then we'll wrap things up. Next slide. So let's get started. This kind of is a summary of the launch of our journey, the EE-STEM 2 Academies for fiscal year 2018 and 2019. Essentially, between the summer of 2018 and the spring of 2019, NAEP delivered 2 cohorts of its Micromessaging Academy to 92 STEM CTE instructors and secondary partners from 15 community and technical colleges in 11 different states. Collectively, we built STEM CTE educators' capacity to create an equitable learning environment. For who? For women, students of color, and students with disabilities. Next slide, please. So early today, I woke up and I took out the previous slide that I had here, which was more detail on processes. And the reason I did that was so that we can focus our attention on this particular slide. Promise me you won't tell my CEO that I did that, but I'm going to try to capture in a nutshell the core of NAEP's Micromessaging Academy and Micromessaging framework, which your speakers today will build on. So with the drum roll, I'm introducing you to NAEP's culture wheel. So what do you see? Well, if you look at this culture wheel, we have different sections here, but what they speak to are our classrooms, perhaps the systems that we operate in, the communities that we live in, maybe even the dynamics within our own families. And for me, I immediately think of my own personal experience when I look at these different, the way this culture wheel is framed, my own personal experience of having to address my own internal biases, many of which were shared with me from well-meaning parents and friends and teachers. So I'll share with you my own little personal story and then I'll walk you through it. There was a time after my father had passed away and I'd already established my career as a professional that I wanted an opportunity to look at a different way of living. And I said, what's the hardest thing that I could think of that I can try that I might want to do? And I decided that I wanted to be a musician. And it sounds crazy. And there are a lot of stereotypes that we have about the broke musician and how it may not be a great idea. And so I had to address my own internal stereotypes, and the stereotypes that my well-meaning friends and family, who, when I told them I was going to leave my very well-paid job at the United Way to pursue a dream. But what I had to do was try to think through these biases. And I had support from friends who helped build up, through micro messaging, my self-efficacy, in that I could actually address this desire. And they helped build up my self-esteem. And so, although there was an accumulation of micro disadvantages, or essentially some messages that were rather negative coming from friends and family, I was able to accumulate more advantage in my case. And what it did was give me the confidence to pursue an opportunity to go on a world tour with a nationally prominent band, never having studied music in my life, but having the capacity to do it, and succeeding to the point where I was working with Amy Winehouse and Erykah Badu and Snoop Dogg and Lauryn Hill, and the Rolling Stones were even coming to my gigs. So that, my own personal story. So let me walk you through this, all right? Cultural stereotypes exist between people and careers. And the stereotypes are beliefs we hold within our culture that lead to assumptions about characteristics, behaviors, social norms. The example of the broke musician. Now, because of stereotypes, we have implicit biases. Everyone possesses implicit biases. I'm a Yankees fan. It comes as an inherent bias that we should win the World Series every year. They are like an invisible undercurrent because we're human. Now, my brain draws on stereotypes to organize and make sense of a complex world. Implicit biases directly affect how individuals like me and you interact with one another. Like how I may sometimes feel if I met someone on a Zoom call like this with a Red Sox cap on. So we send, through micro messages, we send and receive subtle, small, unconscious messages when we interact with each other. So through these small, subtle, unconscious messages, we transmit either positive micro affirmations. Hey, I think the Red Sox are a great team and they got a good shot at winning the series. Or negative micro inequities. The Red Sox, look what happened to them last year. What do you think is going to happen this year? And by the way, the Yankees deserve the World Series. Micro messages are relayed not only through words, but also through nonverbal communication, contextual cues in the classroom and in school, and in the kind of written feedback that we give and receive. An example is the messages I got from my own family and friends when I shared my lifelong dream was to travel the world and play music. Something I was good at, but I always feared wasn't serious or worthwhile. But these subtle messages, the people around us, can create an accumulation of advantage or disadvantage. This is that special zone that we focus on. Now watch the green arrow. That is the point of interruption. The point of interruption is where we collectively have an opportunity to address those subtle messages. And this is the area that Kathy, Herman, and John will focus on today. So let me wrap this up. Self-efficacy. Self-efficacy are the effect that micro messages have on micro messages essentially have on us. It's the belief one holds in her or his ability to perform specific tasks, such as produce an outcome, reach a level of performance, or achieve a goal. And it's strongly correlated with student persistence and achievement, and affects the goals that an individual sets. Now, we all want this for our children, we want this for our students, our friends and coworkers. We rely on this. We look for this with our communities. So thankfully, with my own example, I was able to build on more positive micro messages in my circle than the negative one. And ultimately, this leads to behavior. We all know and have experienced when students have high self-efficacy, they can challenge the status quo. And over time, this can lead to a shift in cultural norms and stereotypes. And with me, it showed me personally that I can achieve almost anything through an awareness of the impact that micro messages are having and what I'm receiving. So before I turn it over to Kathy Albin, I want to ask her, are there any questions? And I want to ask if I've piqued your curiosity at this point.
Gregory, I have one question to start things off. Are micro messages defined as messages external to ourselves, or do we create our own micro messages?
You know, that's a good question. That's a very good question. And I think probably a little bit of both. And I think Kathy, particularly with what she's going to share with the kudos cards, can take a deeper dive into that question, whether micro messages are solely external or can we create them in ourselves. I know for my own example, I have my own cultural stereotypes and I believed in them. And so I, at a point, was providing by surrounding myself with people who echoed those same cultural stereotypes. But I think that's something that I will turn over to our speakers who can talk a little bit from their experience with this directly in their institutions and in their communities.
Yeah, thank you. And Herman responded to me, micro messages are generally external, sometimes called microaggressions. So it sounds like you've got a great panel we can work with. Thank you, Gregory.
All right, so I'll turn it over to Kathy into the next slide.
Hi, welcome everyone, and thank you so much, Gregory. What a great story that you shared with all of us and your journey, and a perfect explanation of what we learned as a group when we attended the micromessaging conference, professional development down in Las Cruces. I am going to shut my video off because I am running the slideshow, so I am going to stop my video and then begin my share and my journey into what I learned and the group that I had the opportunity to participate in the micromessage professional development down in Las Cruces, New Mexico in 2018. My name is Kathy Albin. I was selected as the project lead at North Idaho College. I had literally been on my in this position for 2 weeks when my dean came to me and shared with me about NAEP and what the organization stood for and did. And it was something that touched me on a very deep level. And when I went home that night, I started to look at the NAEP website and learn more about the organization. And I came back the next day and asked my dean if she would allow me to participate in an upcoming professional development opportunity. And she wholeheartedly agreed and allowed me, again, after being 2 weeks on the job, to travel down to Las Cruces with 3 of my colleagues. Our research issue here on this slide became, can supporting educators in a renovation of their practice result in an increase of student success and retention in STEM and CTE career pathways at North Idaho College? So to give a little background, North Idaho College is located in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I have a map there on the left that shows where we're at. We are 30 miles from Washington State, from Spokane, Washington, and about an hour to the Montana border. We are also an hour and a half south of the Canadian border. Our student population numbers here at North Idaho College are 4,741, with 63% female, 37% male, and our average student age of 24. The total population of the 5 northern counties of Idaho, which encompasses the panhandle here, is 258,000 approximately. 90% are white. The median income here in the 5 northern counties is 46,000 annual, and the poverty rate of the 5 northern counties is 15.58%. What is interesting about this demographic information is that we have 2 reservation counties in those 5. So although the 46,000 is far above many areas, we have also resort communities that are pulling that median income up, and that's significant in knowing about our community. Also, here's a picture of the North Idaho College campus. At the bottom part of the picture here is Lake Coeur d'Alene. This is the north shore of Lake Coeur d'Alene. And the mouth here over to the left is the mouth of the Spokane River, which leads into Washington, again, 30 miles here. Bringing the team together. The 4 of us pictured here on your far left, Dr. Liz Zanker, who is an associate professor here at North Idaho College in anatomy and physiology, followed by Kirsten Blanchette, associate professor for chemistry. Myself, Kathy Albin, who at the time was a student success navigator for the Center for New Directions. And on your far right, Karen Thurston, who is a computer science associate professor here at the college. We had never met one another when we traveled down to Las Cruces, and I'm going to echo my colleague Gregory when he said that this has been life-changing, not only for the 4 of us, but for our campus community. With Gregory, Herman, John, and others across the nation. So I'm very honored to be able to have taken part in this professional development opportunity with NAEP. So when we completed our journey down to Las Cruces, we came back to campus and wondered how we were going to go about recruiting and putting together a committee of faculty members here and what we wanted to do as our project. So we reached out to our division chairs, asking for some recommendations. We really wanted to make our focus on STEM and CTE, looking at courses that had low enrollment, high attrition, gateway courses. And then my role was specifically with support services, working with single parents, displaced workers, gender non-traditional, and underrepresented students. What we wanted to do was the professional development that we had taken part in was so powerful to us as faculty members that we wanted to bring that content and share it with the faculty that we had recruited. We ended up having 10 of us serve on this committee. We had asked for a 1-year commitment, which turned out we are on year 3. We will be heading into our 4th year. That is the power and what's happened to us as a group here on this college campus. And the content that we shared was the culture wheel that Gregory had shared with you that we pulled specifically out of NAEP's toolkits that you see pictured here on your screen. And Gregory moved us so beautifully through this culture wheel and what we as educators can do to help interrupt that cycle. And that's what we really wanted to do, is reflect on how we could impact our students in our classroom. So the 4 of us started taking turns and sharing with the other faculty members what we had learned at our professional development and using these as our platform. And again, the culture wheel as our model. What resulted was not only learning opportunity on the culture wheel and these topics, but also some deep self-reflection and some challenges that came up as a group as we started looking at our implicit bias and taking some tests that were presented to us through Project Implicit at Harvard University. And it really was a self-reflection that many of us were not prepared for, and it opened up some conversations that we really felt were of great value as we began to move this work forward. One of the questions that we talked about in our first meeting was, we really wanted to understand what the mindset of our students were. And so what we did was we developed a 3-question self-efficacy survey. The 3 green bulleted items on your screen are what we selected, and we disseminated this survey at the beginning, the middle, and end of the semester for each of our courses. We asked, how confident are you that you will succeed in this course? Are you comfortable making mistakes and learning from them? Do you take on challenges and believe that effort and persistence can lead to success? Not only did were we able to disseminate and gather some data on this from this survey, but it also allowed us to build relationships across our campus in developing the survey itself. Here's a question that I broke out just so that you can illustrate what we looked at. We were able to take each one of those questions that were presented to our students in our courses and break it down. Here you see the example of a biology 228 and 228 lab, which is our anatomy and physiology course. And it shows here that we had 15 students respond with a 5, which was they felt that they could take on challenges and believe that effort and persistence could lead to success at the highest level. So 15 of them selected or rated themselves as a 5 on this survey. 6 rated themselves as a 4, and 2 of them as a 3. And then you see the lab focus on the right side of your screen. We were able to break this out for each of our individual courses and each of the 3 individual self-efficacy survey questions. And so what this caused us to do is we got together as a group and thought, wow, our students had a higher self-efficacy than we had predicted. And we wondered why this was. Was it because they were enrolled in STEM fields, and by nature of them being enrolled in STEM, did that make them respond to the survey, with higher numbers of their self-efficacy? Was it a generational thing? Was it characteristic caused them to respond? Was it a large number of our students were non-first generational students, and so they had that greater self-efficacy to begin with as they entered into college? But we really wanted to focus too on strengthening self-efficacy of all students here at North Idaho College. We wanted to look at how we could grow their strengths, how we could provide what is called WISE feedback, which I will go into in more depth here in a moment. We wanted to have the opportunity to build a deeper relationships with our students and build and support their goals and be able to acknowledge metacognitive strategies and help build momentum. One of the small examples that we did was we created bulletin boards outside of our office space, just with different items. This one shows one that says, I can and I will. And we wanted to see if this kind of sparked some conversation in class and with students and amongst, our peers as faculty. When we were down at our professional development training, we learned what was called WISE feedback from NAEP. It is the feedback that we give to students in being able to praise process and not ability, being able to do so in a timely and frequent manner, being specific and informative in our feedback, also being respectful and growth-minded, and being able to help prompt and not answer for students. What you see on the right here, and again, I will break these out a little more individually, is what we called positivity postcards. And it came as a result of us learning about kudos cards from NAEP. And we decided to take that a step further and develop that using our NIC branding, our colors. And then as the group of 10 faculty collected together, we really wanted to be intentional with the messages that we were providing students. We started collecting student stories when we handed out our positivity postcards. We were able to develop these digitally as a result of our faculty who said, we teach online, we want to be able to have that opportunity to attach these to assignments, quizzes, et cetera there. And then we began to just kind of collect stories from students who wrote back and shared what that experience was like for them to receive a positivity postcard. also what resulted, and this was a more recent outcome, is we had Kimberly Ellis, who is the current NAEP Executive Committee President, present at our affinity group, which Gregory and Herman and John and I will speak to later about. And Kimberly shared with us about QPR and suicide prevention. And at that meeting, we collected, again, as a group of 10 faculty, and decided to add a 5th positivity postcard here, which was "You're important." And so that's being developed by our communications and marketing department right now. We selected a quote from Fred Rogers to be on that positivity postcard. So here you get a little close-up view of what the positivity postcards look like. And it was really fun developing these. I didn't realize when we had brought this forward to the group how opinionated the 10 faculty members were, and looking at font styles and quotes and really just wanting to make them a meaningful project for us. Here's the other 2. And then I again shared that we are going to have our 5th one coming shortly. On this slide here, you can see some examples that we had in using the positivity postcards and sending them out to students. Again, using our WISE feedback as the basis of our feedback that we were providing for students. So you can see a couple of examples here. And then feedback from students after receiving. And I think this is the most powerful piece, is being able to know what effect this was having on our students. And this one over here that has the resilient, I had the opportunity to work with a woman in her early 50s who had earned her GED and wanted to go on and get her CDL at our Workforce Training and Community Education Center. And she had a really challenging time in working with staff and instructors down at Workforce Training Center. She had been through some abuse, and it was just a really tough journey for her to get back into education and find something that she wanted to do. And so she had texted me to her that "You are one of the most resilient people I had ever met." And she said, "Kathy, I didn't honestly know what the word resilient meant. And I had to go after I received your postcard, and I went and looked that up." And she said, "Now it is something that I carry with me all the time." And so she sent me this as a text message and just put resilient with her emoji happy face. So what I'm going to show to you here is we as a group developed some training videos because we wanted to figure out a way that we could get the information from the culture wheel and what we were doing as a small group on campus and spread it to the larger campus community. And what we came up with was being able to have some fun in developing some videos to break out these individual pieces of the culture wheel so that faculty could go in and view these on their own time. So here is Bob Quant, who teaches cybersecurity here at North Idaho College. So I'm going to play this video.
Positivity postcard, you contributed.
Oh, sorry, hang on.
You contributed, here's how I know. Paula, nice contribution in class today. That's weak. What makes this contribution notable, respectful, and timely? How about this? Paula, during Lab Tuesday, you demonstrated to Sean and David how to configure an IP address on their computer when they were stuck. This was unselfish and a thoughtful use of your own lab time to help a fellow student. You did not put them down or make them feel uncomfortable when you offered to help. Because of your assistance, they were able to complete the lab correctly, on time, and feel good about their configuration. I appreciate you helping them and me, Bob.
So what are you still able to see my screen?
We
Okay.
can see the video. There we go.
Thank you.
Positivity postcard, you contributed.
Once we created these videos, we presented them to faculty across campus, and they were able to, again, view these in their own time and then learn about what we were doing as far as projects go. And it spread across campus to the Adult Education Center, which is my current position where I am the director here. And the director at the time was so excited about the positivity postcards that she wanted to create her own branding to provide to students here earning their GED. So here you see an example of what was created with that group. Here are some images of some other training videos that we were able to create, and they were on topics of micromessaging, growth mindset, self-efficacy, positivity postcards. And this again was the need to broaden awareness across campus. We were looking at creative ways to do that. We were invited to speak at Convocation and present one of our videos so that, you know, again, the entire campus was aware of what we were doing. We also have a new teaching and learning center that will be starting in fall of 2021, and all of these videos will be housed in our TLC. This slide here shows how we were able to bring our work to campus and beyond. We were asked to speak at our state CTE conference called REACH and share our work on our self-efficacy survey, on the positivity postcards, and the work on the culture wheel. We also were invited to provide professional development to the Adult Education Center. And which also resulted in a PD at North Idaho College 2-credit graduate level course that we partnered with Northwest Nazarene here in the state of Idaho to faculty. The book that we used was called Teach Students How to Learn by Sandra Yancey McGuire out of Louisiana. But again, the work that we used tied in with what we had learned in our professional development down in Las Cruces, New Mexico. The other piece that was really powerful for us as a group is we presented a showcase to our leadership here at North Idaho College, showing them how we could tie in the work that we had been doing with NAEP and bring it to what was already happening with diversity development here on campus. And then many of us traveled survey and assessment for cultural competence. There were 4 of us who traveled down to take part in that, and we presented to leadership how we could tie in the areas of work that we were doing and come up with an initiative that we called Inclusive Excellence. So we had the support of our leadership behind us, and that was really important as we started moving all of this forward and continue with it. Are there any questions?
Kathy, yes, there's a few questions on logistics. One is about how often do you send the postcards to individual students a semester?
So that varied per faculty member. We had one faculty member, Dr. Zinker, who did it after each one of her major exams. So she provided that feedback. And I will say, you know, it does take time to do that. But the response from students and what that meant to them, she felt was so critically important to help with that efficacy and mindset that she continued to do that after each one. And then what she started doing was documenting the response from students and creating a spreadsheet to show, because what we were trying to see is that there was a relationship between the positivity postcards that we sent out, and if we could see that increase in efficacy and mindset in those students throughout the course of this semester.
And did you see a change?
Some of us did. The ones that provided more frequent feedback absolutely did.
Interesting. And so a question is, do you give one postcard to each student or just to some students?
Again, that was something that we played with. We had faculty members that felt that it was essential to provide to each one of their students, as in the case of Dr. Zinker. Others of us selected students that we felt were struggling or maybe could just use that wise feedback, you know, and for us to be more intentional in providing that wise feedback to certain students. And that's how each of us handled that individually.
Thank you. And one last question that I think your focus has been on women and underrepresented students, but so I don't know if this question applies, but it is do you get a different response? Do you find that men respond differently than women do to the cards?
Actually, yes. And it was very interesting because we had a faculty member that was in our group who taught HVAC out at our career and technical education building. And he was kind of hesitant to use the positivity postcards. And he was actually the one that brought the idea of having a digital option available so that he could provide that digitally. I think that what we saw was that men appreciated it, but we heard feedback from women more often.
Thank you very much.
I would like to now turn it over to John Juarez and Herman Moreno.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Kathy. My name is John Juarez, and I'm going to start our portion of the presentation. I'm the Department Chair of Computer and Information Technology at Doña Ana Community College. And Dr. Herman Moreno, he is a professor in the Math and Statistics Department. In moving kind of forward, where our journey kind of started with the STEM, was kind of unique as well. Our college had an opportunity to participate, and we looked specifically from a college as a whole, from administration, from my dean in particular, the Dean of Advanced Technologies, to look for an inclusive group to participate. So we looked for a diverse group that spanned a kind of, I won't say just leadership. These were faculty as well as some program directors and chairs from across the college. And I'll go ahead and turn off my video just to save some bandwidth. And Kathy, if you could advance to the next slide. Where Kathy lives and works in a very northern part of our US borders, we're a very southern part. Our county, which is our service area, is bordered by Texas and Mexico. Our most southern center, Sunland Park Center, is actually 5 miles from the Mexican border and Texas as well. Additionally, we have a Gadsden Center in the southern part, which is right on the border of Texas and New Mexico. In terms of kind of a relation of where our size is, we have 3,807 square miles in our county. Now we have 2 million people who live in Delaware and Rhode Island, but we only have 204,000 living in our entire county, of which 104,000 live in Las Cruces, which is the major metropolitan area. In the county, our median income is $40,973,000, and Las Cruces is slightly larger at about $43,000. And in the county, our poverty rate is 23.8%, and in Las Cruces, it's 24.4%. So you can see we really have a disparity in terms of socioeconomic. Even in our county, one would expect that to be very much the case. But in Las Cruces, which is a city, a sizable city, it's the 3rd largest city in New Mexico, we still have a high percentage of poverty. Now moving on to the next slide, we'll be discussing our demographics for our students and our faculty. We have 75.9% are Hispanic, which is not unusual considering how close we are to the border. Las Cruces, El Paso, Texas, and Juarez, Mexico kind of have a tri-hub side. Now, Las Cruces is quite a bit smaller, with Juarez being about 2 million and El Paso being 600,000 people. But we really have a unique ecosystem there. Of our students, 16.5% are white, a little over 56% are under the age of 21. 60% of our students receive a Pell Grant, and 31% are first-generation students. Always we try to look to see if our faculty could reflect our student population, but we fall a little short. 36.6% of our faculty are Hispanic, with 49% white. And of our faculty, 75.7% are full-time faculty. This provided for both of us a good perspective in terms of being able to affect the message that comes through. And that's where the eSTEM training really came in, where the discussions when Gregory was talking about micro inequities and micro affirmations, the messaging that takes place. We as a group kind of really focused it on that and began a process to see what can we do to understand the message. Now, the question may be, what came up was, is the message internal or is it a two-party? Well, in my early career as an undergraduate, I was an English major. And there is a philosophy of the reader in the text, similar to the Oriental philosophy that a person can never step in the same river twice. The river is always changing, the streams, the flows. The same with the messaging. There is kind of a philosophy you could never read the same book twice. And for any of us that may have read a book, a novel, and when we were younger, and then reread it as an adult, it changes. I knew that from when I watched the movie Good Will Hunting. When I first saw it, I was Matthew Damon. I was younger. And now when I've seen it as an adult, I really did switch from the mentee to the mentor. So in the messaging that we're going to be reflecting on, we looked upon what were the things we need to understand of messaging and how can we reflect and move both ourselves as well as how we communicate. So the next slide, Kathy. Our diversity group that we came together really was kind of a diversity group for leadership. Try to see how we could bring our training and affect the college as a whole. Looking at the group, you can see we have nursing, math, computers, technology, media. We also had Terry, who was a high school teacher who was also able to join our group, and finally we had Vince. Now this slide is kind of unique because when we first did our wrap-up presentation after our year of training, I was listing the names of the participants by last name. What popped up immediately was all the males showed up first in the list and all the females last. So I changed it to go off with first names only. And you can see it here that we've got a nice mix. It also becomes readily apparent when you look at the photographs. It's a nice blend, a nice mixture. Now it'd be really obvious if we had all the men on the left and all the women on the right. And those also became part of our reflection in the messaging that takes place. I looked at one and presented it to our group when we were meeting, and Kathy was actually the one kind of pointed it out. It was a nice, what I thought a very nice trifold. The students who we featured were 2 women, 1 male. There were students in the pathway, all of them had graduated, and they selected their pictures. What we noticed though, or Kathy brought to my attention, is the male picked a work environment and the 2 girls or the women ended up picking more a social environment. And that became a micro message of kind of a little bit of an inequity of, as Gregory talked about, micro inequities versus a micro affirmation. And if I hadn't had part of the exploration and the training, I probably wouldn't have been sensitive to it. Because when it was first presented, I think I did have a little bit of, but wait, they picked these pictures. This is the ones they wanted. But I realized then later on in reflection that we as mentors need to help our students also to change their messages to micro affirmations in a realization of where they are. So in terms of when messaging taking place, we have both the presenter of the message as well as the receiver of the message. Next slide, please. We used a article that came up from Patricia Briscoe, and it was her perspective of review of using critical reflection in a kind of a framework. On the right, you can see a graphic that kind of explains where her stages were in stage 1 being kind of a questioning stage. This is where thoughts kind of come up a little bit that you start questioning of where what are you seeing? What are you perceiving? In the questioning also, in that first stage, there needs to be a desire to change. Because if you don't question and challenge yourself, then there won't be that desire to move forward, to move to a new area. The stage 2 brings in the struggle stage. And this one also in her literature had a fear reflection on it, that always there is a little bit of fear in making any changes. I remember when I was first reading up about stressors in life, and I saw that weddings or being married was a big stressor. It had a higher stress than funeral. And I was like, well, wait, that just didn't seem right to me. Because prior to when I was looking at that, I'd never been married myself. I'd never gone through a wedding. I'd only attended weddings. To me, weddings were just great parties. People get together, family, friends, celebration. I didn't realize the stress that it took to get to that. So in any change, even positive change, even change that you desire to move towards, knowing that it'll advance yourself, there is an internal struggle, an internal component of fear. And finally, stage 3, the shifting change, the perceptual shift, where there's a reconciliation of the chaos that was created, that fear, that aspect that's kind of hitting through. We're looking at that there needs to be then that reconciliation, a personal discovery of the aha moment that we talk about. And finally, a new practice that we are going to have a transformation. And that's where what the literature, what Patricia Briscoe brought forward in her presentation. So using that as a basis, we moved into the next slide, Kathy. We created a journaling perspective. We wanted to go through, we wanted to meet regularly, and we wanted to journal our interactions, our observations, and we wanted to model it after the perspectives of the 3 stages. So rather than just giving people a possibility of, open-ended, just write down what you think about, we wanted to kind of lead the journaling into a perspective. So we first came up with some inclusion questioning, some questionings of what are you being able to see in your institution? What practices in teaching do we see that either increased or decreased? And also looking at any curricular activities, textbooks, or lab assignments that you might see that had a hidden agenda. Next, we moved into kind of the interactions, and we wanted people to reflect upon the interactions of, again, and this falls back to that questioning of the message, those who hear the message as well as those that present the message. So we wanted people to reflect on where the interaction student to student, student to faculty, self to others, faculty to student, faculty to faculty, and others to you, to yourself. Now, reflecting back when we did this several years ago, we focused then journaling on microaggressions. And I think this is also very important and timely in terms of the training, the immersion that we had for messaging. Right now, looking back, I'm going like, oh, microaggressions. We focused on microaggressions. We didn't have the terminology to say that we had micro inequities or micro affirmations. That came later in our journey. But now looking back, I would look to see not to just focus on the aggression, the negative, but also look towards the positive. And that's where I greatly appreciate, and I think where I grew from seeing where Kathy's journey on the affirmations taking place, the positivity cards, where we were first looking at how can we reduce the aggression, and by just the fact of our type of activities, inclusiveness grew, but we didn't have the terminology to really have to say how do we describe the positive versus describing the negative. Next slide, Kathy. In our journaling, then we moved into the secondary stage, the self-efficacy, describing the experiences that you felt, the actions that you may have taken or possibly including what you might have taken later on. Back to the analogy that you can never step in the same river twice. Witnessing, being a part of, either passively or actively, in any micro messaging while we're in the midst of it, there may be a lot of distractors. Thinking back and reflecting, which is what we wanted through the journaling prospect, we have an opportunity to reevaluate ourselves, reevaluate the situation, and be able to make some kind of positive steps on if and when we might be in a similar situation. We have then a more perspective to be able to make more effective and positive changes. In our reflection, and this is part of with the messaging on it, and asking what actions you might have taken, we wanted also to reflect, while we were involved in this, did we feel more drawn to journal more frequently, reflecting back, taking the time? Now, of course, with everyone, we have the limitations of time. So even week by week, we may not have the same opportunity, but it's important to bring an opportunity to come together and to be able to reflect back on or journaling, and more so also in viewing any emotional triggers that we might have, or any emotional responses, either positively or negatively. In the journaling, being able to have that inner self-reflection for personal growth and change. Which brings us on into the latter part, being in the prompting for our journaling is, what transformations were we looking for? How would we review our perspectives, as well as the perspectives of others, and how they might respond both to us or to other members in the community? Next slide, Kathy. Which really brings us into, for me, the summary of where the training that we had really provided a positive aspect. As I mentioned, we didn't even have some of the terminology early on to describe how we wanted to model ourselves, as well as to lead our community into some growth and change. So to me, there were tools that were focused. There were much literature in terms of what NAIC could provide for us, as well as giving us, to me, the importance of being able to have the words, the choices, the terms that we could reflect back and say, oh, this is the term of what's happening while we're involved in it. We had also other opportunities of models for successful collaboration. As mentioned early on, I didn't think 3 years ago when we first started this, that I would think we would still be so closely tied and involved, and wanting to be involved because of the growth. Learning from Kathy's community versus ours community, even though we're very different in terms of some perspectives, closely aligned in many of our other demographics. So we're always finding opportunities to be able to collaborate with others, because we can find some opportunities. What brings us into a networking capability. Once we have the tools, once we see the models for collaboration, we noted that there is very much a positive perspective of wanting to be involved with others who have a very similar and personal mission. And finally, in our perspectives as leaders of the college, we're looking for what strategies could we do for transforming our culture to include a culture much greater for equity. And finally, the last slide, Kathy, which kind of brings us to our transformative action. For my journey as a department chair, I brought what I learned to my department and really worked towards changing our language to provide more affirmations. I really have a great set of faculty. We very are mindful, I think, or my perspective was that we've had a Women in Technology organization for 13, 14 years now, had very great success, but there was still more that we could be doing. One of the obvious opportunities we had a growth of 70% for our certificates of completion. And that's over a rolling average from the academic year 16-17 to 19-20. that came from us being much more selective in the messaging that we brought forward to our students. We changed some of our perspectives in having our students bring forward and saying, this is something you have earned. Our completions for full degrees did not change very much. But in the certificates of completion, when we were looking for the students going through, which were stepways up to their Associates of Applied Science, we found students were neglecting to apply for them. We looked for them, we encouraged them, and we used the affirmations when they said, oh, thank you. We said, no, this isn't something for us to be thanked for. This isn't a gift. This is something that you earned. You worked, you passed these courses, you've earned the certificate. For us, that was a small micro affirmation, but it was just a slight turning of the phrasing that helped empower our students and embolden our students. For Armand's journey, and he'll be speaking about this a little bit more, as a professor in a service department, as a two-year school, we do not have math majors. That's not one of our degrees. We have pathways for students going on to 4 years, as well as in Armand's department, he encounters students from all types of degree granting programs, including my students. For his journey, he looked for collaborating with other like-minded educators. And as a result, he submitted a grant proposal to NSF. I'm part of that grant proposal. I see how hard he worked for it. And he'll be able to speak right now on what his experience with the affirmations and inclusiveness that we've had led him to be able to submit the proposal. Armand?
Thank you, John, and good morning, everybody. I wanted to talk about the impact NAEP has had on me and my ability to produce a grant proposal that started with conversations between John and I about improving our STEM teacher pool, as well as increasing degrees in his field of computer and information technology. So this schematic describes my process of developing a grant from idea to submission after participating in the equity training and action research facilitated by NAEP. I was able to problematize what was happening in terms of our STEM pipeline and to take ideas merged with what we had learned together as the seeds to developing some solutions to that STEM pipeline. So early on, I began to allow for those ideas to be critically appraised, first by my dean, who assured me there was a grant in there somewhere, and subsequently by other stakeholders, including deans, VPAAs, school district, and of course, the NSF program officer. I wanted to be confident that my perspective on the problems and potential solutions matched the realities that other people who had other vantage points were experiencing. Of course, writing grant involves learning many new skills, not least of which is understanding all the terms, acronyms, rules, and so on that guide your submission. But one of the most important aspects for me in this process was building the team. Recruiting team members always began with me telling folks what the key goal was and sharing with them the vision for how we could address the problem of building a pipeline for marginalized students through the equity work and the equity mindedness that we had been involved with through NAEP. The 7 individuals, which included a department chair, that would be John, a dean, an astrobiologist, and 2 math faculty members, were very diverse with very different core competencies, but we all shared the same vision of equity for our students. Next slide, please. If funded, this project will improve the outcomes for the rural Hispanic students we serve, many of whom live in poverty. As you saw, the poverty rate is much higher than the national average. And many of these students, we believe, have been systemically marginalized because of their ethnicity. We hope to work in favor of these students to improve our collective community. The program will impact 14 instructors, most of them math instructors, math faculty, who will be going through the same professional development that we went through with NAEP. And we hope that they will go through similar transformations as professionals as we have gone through, of course, according to their own expertise and character. Students will gain experiences in collecting data and with the scientific process through a NASA radio astronomy lab. And we will also conduct novel STEM ed research upon which we hope to scale up. And so the MMII is the Multicultural Math Identity Initiative for Professions in STEM. And the 4 pieces on your left are the pieces that make up the framework. The upper left-hand corner is this idea of the micro-affirmations that faculty will be disseminating to students through growth mindset, like the idea of the power of yet, and the self-efficacy strategies that we learned with NAEP, which are micro-affirmations to help students build self-efficacy. Next slide, please. In the process, we've built relationships with colleagues in and out of our institution whom we know are guided by the same or a similar core value. We've made important connections with stakeholders at New Mexico State University, which Doña Ana Community College is a part of. At least 3 of our team members have been recruited to work on collaborative grants that will impact both our institutions and the students we serve. So John and I and Shannon Bradley have all worked on collaborative grants with New Mexico State University. As I present the ideas that drive our work, I hope I'm building relationships that will allow us to broaden the scope of our work. Finally, you see the last bullet on your right. I have to remind myself and hope that my colleagues will hold me accountable to this, that I have to do better in including the voices of the students and the community members that we, and so that's been my journey that I've followed through on through my participation with NAEP, and how I've been able to go and take that opportunity to the next level and try to make a broader impact here in Doña Ana County. Next slide.
All right, this is Gregory Jackson back with you. Got my video going. Okay, so we've taken a deeper dive, and so I'm sure you're all ready to take a breath of fresh air, a little air. We're gonna come up a little bit, and I'm gonna give you kind of a snapshot on where this collective work ended through this grant. So if we can go to the next slide, please, Kathy. So for this project, the evaluation team included the Allison Group and SMU Core, which co-developed a new set of evaluation instruments for NAEP. It included a pre, post, a delayed post survey for the training. And it also included an interview protocol for the PLC leads, the professional learning community leads, which Kathy and John were 2 of the 11 leads. So the results of the project were positive. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. As I shared earlier, over the 2 years, NAEP had delivered 2 cohorts of its Micromessaging Academy, reaching out to 92 STEM and CTE instructors and secondary partners from 15 community and technical colleges in 11 different states. Now, what the survey showed us is that the participants increased their attitudes and perceptions, their knowledge and skills, and classroom behavior in creating an equitable learning environment. That's what this data is showing you here on the right. Participant self-ratings of their level of knowledge with respect to the equity concepts before versus after the training increased by an impressive 207%, or threefold. And the participants, Herman, John, Kathy, reported an additional 16% gain in knowledge and understanding at the end of the academy after the completion of the PLCs and the capstone projects. So what I'm saying is that we're showing a lot of outcomes here, and we're building self-efficacy amongst the participants. Next slide, please. So this kind of leads us to where we've taken the work since the completion of the grant, since our participants here on this call have applied some of that work within their institutions and in their communities. So what we're going to do is we're going to share with you how we formed this affinity group that carried the work and these lessons forward in a collaborative framework. So I'll frame that out for you, and Kathy will go into the deeper dive in terms of what we really talked about and what we discussed. So now, when we're talking about where we took the work, I want you to imagine it's leading up to New Year's Eve. And what do we all do when it comes close to New Year's Eve? I can tell you for me that from most of November, December, I start reflecting on the past year or the past years, the different habits that worked for me and the ones that didn't work so well for me. And maybe thinking through a few new habits and goals that I need to add to my life. And so what I do at that time is I begin to lay this foundation. This plan could be a healthier diet. It could be, you know, the usual ones, exercise, losing weight, those kinds of things. And in the same way and in the same spirit of a quote unquote New Year's resolution, we collectively came together, we came to this conclusion that we wanted to enhance our pattern of thinking and unleash new approaches to our work through a collaborative approach. And what I mean by we is it really began with the PLC leads from all the member institutions who participated in cohort 1 and 2. We came together, showcase of our work, and after some time had passed, and asked each other, where is the work now? Now the grant's completed. We've checked off the boxes on it in terms of all the outcomes and deliverables. Where are you taking the work now? What are you doing? And what can we learn from each other? How can we continue this? And so thus was born the NAEP Affiliate Affinity Group. So what this slide really talks to is how we form that. And I think one reason we find value in sharing this is that this is a process that I think you and your teams and your partners might be interested in considering as you think through how to extend your work through a collaborative framework with other external partners that may go outside of the communities that you directly serve, but that can maybe help shape your thinking. So with this, we created an affinity group, and we created what we call a chartering project charter, which I've laid out here in terms of 3 blocks. But a project charter, which is essentially, if you look at it, it looks like a slide deck. And it's a document or a deck that contains the essence of the project, a roadmap, or our North Star to help us navigate on this journey, keeping with that analogy. And so what it does is it documents a shared understanding of the project from all the principals. And it's a tool that can be used to present, once completed, to our colleagues, to our supervisors via this slide deck, so that you can share it out and help them understand really what this means and whether or not this is something organizationally you can commit to in terms of your time. And it's another thing, it's a tool that can be referred back to during the cycle of this work so that we can recenter around the project goals that we started out with. So on this slide, you'll see these 3 key blocks that I'm talking about. Block number 1, individual expectations, team norms and values, and anticipated outcomes. Sort of laying the lay of the land. Block 2 is thinking through, how do we deliver on that? What are the project activities that need to take place? When can we schedule sessions for doing the work? And then when can we schedule sessions for actually convening and sharing? And then the 3rd block is, once we've completed all the deliverables in our timeline, what are the next steps? What are the top outcome ideas that have come from as a result of our work, or that we anticipate coming? And so with these 3 blocks in place in this particular charter, it's something, as I stated earlier, that we can return to recenter if we feel that we're going a little bit adrift. So before I turn it over to Kathy, so, I mean, this is how we started the project charter. Essentially what our outcome was we met, we got the PLC leads from this grant together, and they laid out their expectations and their norms. And then we figured out that the best way to convene is to set a recurring day every 2nd Friday of the month for our planning meetings, as well as for our coming together and presenting and inviting guest speakers and other kinds of things that we did during our session. And Kathy will go into more details. And as we've gone through, we measured our key outcomes against where we started and what we thought we were starting out with, and what we anticipated that we wanted to gain from this experience. So I'm going to, before I turn it over, are there any questions related to the project charter itself? If not, I'm going to turn it over to Kathy.
Thank you, Gregory. What you see before you is what we called our Lunch, Laugh, and Learn series, and the topics of discussion that we have participated in over the course of the last 8 months together. We started out with our Educators Equity in STEM 2 group coming together and presenting much of what you saw today, sharing each of our projects and what our experience was. Then we invited guests from New Jersey and Illinois and the change that we can affect within our sphere of influence. We then invited Joe Green, who is a NAEP Executive Committee member and the DC Office of State Superintendent of Education, who presented us with equal access to career pathways without prejudice or bias for DC youth. Followed by Kimberly Ellis, as I shared earlier, the story and the impact that she had on North Idaho College in regards to what she shared. Kimberly is the NAEP president, and she is also Special Populations and Career Service Coordinator at Technical College System of Georgia. As I shared earlier, she shared some suicide prevention and mental health first aid topics, and she works with QPR Institute out of Spokane, Washington. Marcus Flynn, the executive director of Black Men Teach out of Minnesota, who shared with us a pipeline for male recruiting and sustaining Black male teachers. That last bullet item, we as a group talked about at our last meeting together, our affinity group, where we, this is all still in progress for us on what we want to do in bringing this work forward from these topics that we've been discussing over the course of the past several months. And one of them that really came clear was the need for mentors. And John and Herman and myself talked about ways that we could bring potentially the pipeline that was shared out by Marcus Flynn on the male Black teachers, and bringing that into a need for mentors and being able to recruit teachers who look like the students that we teach. And whether that be replicating that pipeline into a natives teach or a Hispanics teach, again, using that model from Marcus. So these are just kind of in the air thoughts that we have as we've been able to experience these keynote speakers over the course of this past year together. Any questions in regards to our chartering process or our guest speakers that we had?
No
Herman?
questions. See, and we're got less than 10 minutes left.
Herman, if I could turn it over to you to talk about the paradigm shift.
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. So as you've listened to us today, I'm sure you've become aware of the fact that we all care very deeply about giving every individual we serve an opportunity to be successful. It's no accident that we've all connected together through NAEP. Indeed, we all gravitated towards the opportunity to work with NAEP because we were all already equity-minded individuals. I'm sure many of you here today would fall under that same category. What NAEP was able to do for us that maybe couldn't have happened before we came together 3 years ago was to help us understand and apply the many tools that we now have been able to put to work in different ways at our own institutions. Those tools, strategies were twofold. First, we learned a set of pedagogical tools, such as growth mindset strategies and the self-efficacy strategies. Secondly, we experienced the process of action research that helped us be accountable to each other for applying the strategies and required us to work together for change. Whether you look at Kathy's group and the video training and positivity cards, our group's journaling strategies, the communications tools that John implemented, and countless other permutations that involved that folks involved with EE-STEM have implemented. Remember, there were 15 of these groups. What begins to emerge is a mass of educators who are equity equipped. Furthermore, as our equity networks have grown and as we share with people that core ideal of equity, and as we continue to learn and connect through initiatives like the Affinity Group and other groups we form with our colleagues at our institutions, we feel like we're now in a different professional phase. In some, I believe that we've all been transformed into equity agents. Once made toward more monumental changes, particularly because we're no longer working alone. Next slide.
All right, this is Gregory again. I'm not going to put my camera on, but I'm going to wrap it up. I know we have only a few more minutes, but what I want to speak to really is, it's looking at where do we take the work from here? And one of the things that Herman was leading to in terms of going through this experience and then ending up feeling as if they're equity advocates is kind of what I'm going to share with you, kind of the framework that I call the 3 keys of equity leadership, which is how we are pursuing digging deeper into this work. And from where I sit in terms of as the Associate Director for Membership and Partnerships, how do I move relationships from organizations
Can we get Gregory back?
We seem to have lost Gregory for a moment. Folks, hold on while we...
take action?
Okay, here we are.
So with Discover is this training, it's the Micro Messaging Academy, it's the experience that they've had with our training tools and resources. The connection is where the participants inspire and team with others locally and nationally outside of their departments, where they encourage shared learning and opportunities, collaborators, LEAs are today. Building on our collective knowledge. And the third aspiring to, where we want to enter, is take action. And that's where collectively as participants in this process, we act to move the needle on equity locally and nationally. And what does that look like? It's contributing toward the thought leadership that leads to advocacy and policy changes that will impact our budgets, that will impact community and school boards, create policies that have a broad impact. So it's a broader thing. So it's really creating this kind of circle, this cycle of leadership from binary to a more collaborative approach to a taking action and advocacy approach. And so we've kind of laid the framework for that for you today, and certainly welcome any questions you have and any input that you have on this as well. So this is an opportunity for all of us to transform leadership and equity engagement, which is what excites me. So I will end it there. I will ask my colleagues, Kathy and John, if they have any final thoughts before we move on to questions. If we have a couple questions. Any final thoughts, Kathy and Herman? John?
Well, I do see a message in the chat from Thomas. Thank you, Thomas. And his question is, with the positivity postcards, generally, did we see evidence of improvement in performance or willingness to engage from struggling students? We saw both. And what those positivity postcards really allowed us to do is start to build relationships, deeper relationships with students who all of a sudden saw the connectivity to their instructors who maybe didn't feel as accessible prior to receiving a postcard. And it allowed us to open up conversations on, the study cycle and learning strategies and how mindset matters and, motivation and learning and all of those topics that we hope we can engage our students with. And that postcard really was a platform, a trampoline, a jump start for us to be able to open up those conversations with students. And so to me, I mean, they're invaluable. I cannot say enough about what that meant. And then again, just pulling it in and making it our own as an institution with our branding and the relationships that created across campus, and the want and desire from other departments and areas to learn about WISE feedback, because they really are opening the door for that intentional feedback that we learned from NAEP, that wise feedback. So Thomas, thank you for that question. And that's really what we saw with both the performance and the willingness to engage.
Kathy, thank you so much. I want to honor the time we have here. We have just a minute left. But all of you from NAEP, I really appreciate this presentation that you gave. Definitely shows the possibility we have to really grow the awareness of building equitable and culturally responsive environments, and really addressing the cultural wheel that NAEP has presented. So thank you so much for that. For those of you who want to access this recording, it is available on our resource library. You can see the link right here. We also have a website that we'd like you to make available to yourselves. And we've done a couple of publications in the same space. So I think we've got great partners here and great partners in you as attendees to really move forward what's really been important in this time of building equity and really creating the awareness for all of your instructors. So I think we can go to the last couple of slides, Kathy, and wrap it up here. I wanted to go ahead to the next slide. Just to thank Elaine and Cynthia as colleagues on this particular grant, the HSI ATE Hub. And you have our contacts here along with the slide that you had before for NAEP, who are really great partners of ours. And I believe this, I think that's one more slide after that, or I don't have it right here. It's, oh yeah, we want you to wait for that survey. So it's 11:30 here in Phoenix, Arizona, and I just want to thank you all very much for your participation.